Barbara Simpson.
Indeed, this is Barbara Simpson with you on Coast to Coast AM. As I mentioned, we're going to be talking about health and disease, and we'll be talking about our bodies. Basically, the bottom line what we're going to be talking about is what can we do to stay healthy, to prevent disease, and maybe even better, what can we do to cure illnesses that we already have? Is there something so simple that can do all of that at first glance you might say, well, that's just ridiculous. It couldn't be that simple. Well, maybe it could, and that's what we're going to find out about. There is a theory, and it has to do with water, just plain water. I'm not talking about coffee or tea or soft drinks or milk or anything like that. We're talking about plain, ordinary water, assuming it's clean, of course. If we don't get enough water, are we just getting dehydrated, or are we really doing more harm than that? Well, the issue is the metabolism of water and what it means to our health. Can our good health be quite so simple? Now, we do know that the body is about 75% water, and we're told that the brain is about 85% water. What happens if you only have 1 or 2 glasses of water a day? They do tell us to drink those 8 glasses of water a day. Do you do that? Bet you don't. Not too many people do. Now, the coffee and the tea and the soft drinks and the beer and the wine and all the other stuff, that doesn't count. I'm talking about water. Got a couple of interesting stories about that to tell. Interestingly enough, they happened before I knew for certain that we would be having our guests with us this evening, so we will talk about that. We have 2 gentlemen with us. One is a medical doctor. His name is Dr. F. Batman-Gilich. It doesn't spell the way it sounds, so he said we could call him Dr. B, and I will do that. And also with Dr. B is Bob Butts. He is not a doctor, but he is a believer. And between the two of them, we're going to be talking about some writings that the doctor has done, certainly his research in the area. His book is called Your Body's Many Cries for Water, and addresses the issue of how we can stay healthy or get back to health, quite simply, by drinking more water. Maybe it is that simple. We'll find out. As we continue on Coast to Coast AM, I'm Barbara Simpson.
All over the world, this is Coast to Coast AM on the Premier Radio Networks.
So we're going to be talking about water. And let me introduce my guests so that you'll know who we're speaking with, and then we'll get into this subject because it's absolutely fascinating. With 2 gentlemen with us, Dr. Batman-Gilich, and he said we could call him Dr. B, and he is, in fact, a medical doctor, so this is not just hearsay. We're talking about this issue with a man who has practiced it with patients. And also with us is Bob Butts, who is not a medical doctor, but a great believer in the theories of Dr. B. So first of all, Dr. B, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Barbara.
I need you to speak up, please.
Thank you very much for having me on the air with yourself.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and we can hear you much better. And Bob Butts, are you there?
Well, some people think I'm not all here, but I'm here.
Well, we'll get into that and find out as we go along and see if you really are. Because, Dr. B, we're talking about a medical issue, I want to just give my audience a little bit of your background. You were born in Iran in 1931 and 1946. Just months after the Second World War, you were sent to a school in Edinburgh, Scotland, and you were entered, after that you entered St. Mary's Hospital Medical School of London University as a second-year student in 1951. You completed your studies, and you were selected as a house doctor in your own medical school. In Iran, before the revolution of 1979, you were working on a family charity medical center in Iran. And at that point, the government there, the revolutionary government, decided to put you in jail and confiscate all of your personal and family assets, something they did to many, many families in that country at that time. They accused you of a variety of crimes, so-called, and prepared you for execution.
Absolutely
However,
correct.
that actually happened. How long between the time they accused you and said you were going to die did you live knowing that you might well die very soon?
Actually, when they took me to prison, I knew that was the ultimate purpose.
To kill you?
Yeah, but when they realized I was a medical doctor and I was useful, so they stopped their theatrics and they delayed my being processed.
Mm-hmm.
And this gave me the opportunity to test water as a medication in that stressful environment.
Now, they wanted to kill you and others like you simply because you were a class of people who lived in Iran before the revolution, and they just simply didn't want you around. Wasn't that basically
it? That is
it?
absolutely correct. They also wanted to confiscate the assets of these people.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to take away the projects and so on, and install their own cronies in these projects as owners or as operators. So the people who had created the projects had to go and had to be dispensed with.
Right.
Many thousands of people were shot and killed in this process.
And everything they owned was stolen in the process.
Taken, yes, confiscated.
Now you survived. What about other members of your family?
Well, the other members of my family, a couple of them were in the prison. My uncles were in the prison. But we were actually tried, and we were able to defend ourselves. When they realized that I had made this discovery about water, and the judge evaluated the article I had given him, treatment of peptic ulcer disease with water, he gave the article to other doctors to read, and he came back 4 sessions later and said, "You've made a tremendous discovery. I wish you luck for the future." And that was the first time I knew that I had a future, because I was, at that very moment, I was tried or was being tried for corrupt unearth deserving to be shot.
Wow. You say that you had done some research on this before. How long had you been working on this theory that increasing the amount of water that people drink can either keep them healthy or cure certain medical conditions that they have?
Throughout my life, I was truly struck by the potentials of water as a medication. I used to use it in my clinical practice. And in the prison, I had the opportunity to test it in relief of pain, of peptic ulcer disease, and any other condition that blossomed with the stress of the prison, including depression, including hypertension, including diabetes, and epilepsy, and a whole host of other problems that occurred, back pain, occurred in the prison.
Now, you had done the study, and that study that you showed, the printed study that you showed the judge, which saved your life, had to do with using water for peptic ulcers. Is that right?
That is correct. I gave him an article. I had treated about a few hundred persons. Each one of them had given a testimonial that some of them had the problem for 20 years, 30 years, and all of a sudden in the prison environment, with increased water intake, their symptoms had disappeared, which was to me as a clinician was a fantastic discovery. And I realized that God had sent me there to make this discovery, so I just paid attention to doing my research rather than being worried about my own self.
Now, in the prison, they knew you were a doctor. Did they assign you, say, to the clinic, and then therefore you were in charge of patients, and you could treat them?
I was a doctor in my own block of 200 or 300 persons, and I was in charge of the people, and then eventually after I was tried, and they gave me a sentence of 3 years instead of being shot, and then I was able to work in the clinic of the prison, and that's where I did most of my subsequent research, and eventually I treated over 3,000 fellow prisoners with water, and no medication. In the last 4 months of my stay in the prison, we hadn't used a single bottle of antacid. The water was a tremendous medication in that prison environment.
Did you only treat people with the peptic ulcers, or was it all kinds of...
No, I explained that I treated a whole lot of conditions with water, and they all responded to water.
Now, how would, on what basis would you, for example, if you had a patient who had, diabetes or something, did you treat people with diabetes?
Yes.
All right, if they were taking insulin, how could you get them to stop using insulin?
Oh, well, there are two types of diabetes. The ones who are dependent on insulin, the insulin requirements reduced.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones who were insulin independent, the type 2 diabetes, they gradually became not a diabetic, but a normal person. I mean, they didn't have a rise in the sugar level in the body and eventually in the urine. Water cured them of diabetes.
Was there anything special about the water?
No, it was called city water. No special water, it was just city water.
Mm-hmm.
Well, eventually I realized that the people I treated for peptic ulcer disease, they were all thirsty, and we had labeled a situation of thirst with a label of disease.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was released eventually, by the way, I stayed 4 more months in the prison because the warden came to me and said, "We realized you're not a bad person we thought you were, and we are thinking of releasing you." I thanked him and I said that I'm in the middle of a very interesting research. I need to stay longer to complete my research. So I stayed 4 more months, and I was treating bleeding peptic ulcers with highly concentrated sugar solution. I gave a lot of sugar to these people in water, and in this way I stopped the bleedings, and they started improving. So this was a new discovery of looking at disease through a physiological perspective, and that water corrects the physiology of the body to the point that the disease goes.
You know, it sounds so simple. Why is it not something that was looked at before? Or, quite frankly, until I came across your material, I wasn't even aware that it was a possibility. Again, maybe it's too easy and the drug companies aren't making money on it. Could that be it?
That is exactly the reason, because who makes money out of water? I don't.
Mm-hmm.
And when the body is dehydrated and manifests dehydration in as many ways as we in medicine have invented diseases, so naturally water is a better medication in most health problems than anything pharmaceutical industry has to offer. And as such, so if they pursue water as a medication, who's going to make money? The sick care system that survives and thrives on people staying sick will begin to shrink. So that is why this information is not being pursued by the NIH, by the AMA, by a whole lot of these insurance companies that hike up the monthly payments without offering a cure to any of the health problems.
Now, you are a practicing doctor in the United States now?
No, I'm not. I gave up medicine. The reason is that if I'm going to practice medicine and tell people go and drink water, I would feel a fraud if I collected money from them. And furthermore, I would very soon be struck off any register.
That was the point of my question. I was just curious as to what kind of reaction did you get from the traditional medical establishment in this country? I would suspect you had a pretty rough time.
Actually, they do not engage in discussion with me because I have got the scientific background to explain the role of water in the health problems that I advocate water intake for.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing research for the past 21 years at a molecular level and explaining dehydration in various scientific language that no one can argue with.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, in 1987, by the way, the article I gave the judge was eventually translated and was published in the Journal of Clinical Gastroenterology in June of 1983. So
that's mainstream.
That's a mainstream medicine.
Yeah.
And they also reviewed my book, Your Body's Many Cries for Water, and published it in the Journal of Clinical Gastroenterology. So both my book and my articles are mainstream peer-reviewed articles. And then in 1987, I explained a paradigm shift in medicine at a cancer conference in Greece. There was an international cancer conference, and I was asked to deliver the guest lecture of the conference. I explained that pain is a sign of dehydration, and we need to look at pain in a different perspective, as we've done in the past, and look at it as a system disturbance produced by dehydration, which eventually produces a whole host of other problems, including cancer formation in the body. And this article was peer-reviewed by the scientific secretariat of the conference and was eventually published in September-October issue of Anti-Cancer Research in 1987. And in 1989, I was asked by the scientific secretariat of the Third Interscience World Conference on Inflammation to present my new perspective of histamine as a neurotransmitter in charge of water regulation and drought management programs of the body. Mm-hmm. That in dehydration, histamine becomes active, and whatever problems we have for which we take antihistamines should be considered as problems of dehydration or drought in the human body. So, and if you look at the pharmaceutical industry's products, 80% or 90% of all medications that are being used are antihistamines in one form or another. In psychiatric problems, they use antihistamines. In allergy, they use antihistamines. In asthma, they use antihistamines. And a whole lot in pain, they use antihistamines. They label them differently, but they're basically antihistamines.
Does this relate to the spate of immune system problems that we have today? It seems
yes,
to me...
Yes, absolutely, because you see, when there is dehydration, histamine wears two caps in the physiology of the human body. One cap is a master regulator and drought management program operator of the body. Mm-hmm. And its second cap is the immune system operator. When it wears the cap as a water regulator, it inhibits its own activity on the immune system. In other words, the immune system immediately becomes suppressed as a result of excessive activity of histamine in drought management program, because otherwise dehydration would flare up the immune system. So one of the problems that we have, and since we are basically dehydrated society and we confuse beverages with water and take beverages that further dehydrate the body, basically our society is immune suppressed as a result of dehydration that they suffer from.
It's fascinating. We're going to continue our conversation with Dr. B, Dr. Batman Gilic. He has a fascinating book about it, Your Body's Many Cries for Water, but the theory really is challenging, because if you think about all of the diseases that we talk about, and we do talk about a lot of them on my program and others here on Coast to Coast, it all goes back to this immune system difficulties that we have. It seems to be growing, not getting smaller, and yet think of the thousands of gallons of soft drinks and coffee and tea and other things that we drink. We'll continue with this fascinating aspect of health and sickness right here on Coast to Coast AM. This is Barbara Simpson.
want to come on down to some damn cafe. Roll it down, tell me live in the moment. Don't get too far ahead, don't live in the past. I blink my eyes and the moment is over. I guess another day has passed, but it's just another day.
From coast to coast and worldwide on the internet, this is Coast to Coast AM with Barbara Simpson on the Premier Radio Networks.
This is Barbara Simpson, and we're speaking with our guests, actually two guests, but we're first talking with Dr. B. His book is called Your Body's Many Cries for Water. He realized the importance of water when he was a political prisoner after the fall of the Shah of Iran in his native country, Iran. And during that time in prison, when he was medicating and working with the clinic in the prison, he was found that he was able to treat the pain of a fellow prisoner's peptic ulcer with water. He did clinical research on prison inmates, and throughout the time that he was in jail, he treated 3,000 more ulcer sufferers with nothing but water and was successful. His findings have been published in the Journal of Clinical Gastroenterology in 1983. He has spoken before any number of conferences, and his belief, quite frankly, is that you're not sick, you are thirsty. That's his motto. Americans are over-medicated, but medicine does not cure disease. He says that water is a cost-free and natural cure to many ailments. And this comes to the bottom line that I have believed on many levels, is that since there's no money in water, the mainstream medicine and the pharmaceutical companies are not terribly interested in developing it. Prevention is not something that they're looking for. Curing is because, well, I wouldn't say curing. Treatment is because that's where the money is. You know, follow the money. In treatment, cost of drugs, that's the money. If you're healthy, you don't need to take any drugs, and that's not how they make money. We're talking about this. It's a fascinating theory, and we'll find out as we come back with Dr. B just what is dehydration. How do you know if you're dehydrated? Can you prevent disease? Can you also cure disease? And where does that leave us? I'm Barbara Simpson. We'll be right back.
All over the world, this is Coast to Coast AM on the Premier Radio Networks.
We're talking with Dr. B, and also with us, and I don't want the audience to forget that you're there, Bob Butts is also with us. Bob, very briefly, because we'll have more time to talk later, how did you get involved in this? Because you're not a doctor, are you?
Well, I'm involved with automobiles and been in the automotive business for over 30 years, and I noticed a similarity.
In what way?
If you don't check the water in your car, that's going to be the first thing that's going to kill it. Mm-hmm. The whole world knows that nothing can kill a person quicker than lack of water. For some strange reason, no doctor does that first. In fact, it's basically ignored. But how I got involved with Dr. Batman Gelage, we had suffered the loss of a company, devastating loss and a lot of money, and almost lost the other company that I had. Got ripped out by the legal system.
Mm-hmm.
Made up my mind to make something come out of it so great that we'd be glad we lost it. But it had to be something we couldn't make a dime on. And that's what just caused my attention to focus on. I had no idea where it was going to come from. But when I read a solicitation for a newsletter, it was done by Sam Beiser about the man who made the greatest health discovery in history, it kind of intrigued me. So I did subscribe to the newsletter, and I got this incredible interview with Sam Beiser and Dr. Batman Gelage.
Mm-hmm.
I took it to a friend of mine here in northeastern Pennsylvania who's the head of a hospital, very prominent man, medical doctor. I asked him if he'd take a look at it and tell me what he thinks. He came back and said, Bob, this is nothing but common sense. It's going to put a lot of doctors out of business. But don't expect me to get on a pedestal to talk about it because I could lose my license. I said, get out of here. Why would they do that? He says, take it from me. That's exactly what would happen. And he says, I just don't have that kind of courage to risk everything that I've worked for. But keep going with it because I believe in it.
Wow. And you've been with it ever since, helping to promote the idea then, right?
Well, I took it, we were doing a lot of advertising at one particular radio station, and I had the opportunity, I called Dr. Batman Gellage, and I interviewed him on the program.
Mm-hmm.
And he also talked to Sam Liguri, the program director of the station, who had a angina, bad angina, for about 5 years, and he was gearing himself up for a bypass operation. Well, he decided to take up Dr. B's program. Within 2 weeks, no more angina pain. Now,
Come on, 2 weeks?
Within 2 weeks. Now, I'm saying, boy, this is hard to believe. And he never had that. This was in 1994, August of 94, and he has never had this problem since. In fact, a local television station here interviewed Sam Liguri.
Let me ask Dr. B, how would you define what dehydration is? I mean, to me, I'm a layman. I know quite a bit about medicine, but I'm not a doctor or a nurse. Dehydration means basically you don't have enough fluids in you, you don't have enough water in you.
Yes.
And it manifests when you feel thirsty. Is that accurate or not?
Absolutely wrong.
Speak up, please.
Absolutely wrong. The entire monument of medicine is based on 4 flawed assumptions. The first one is that dry mouth is the only sign of dehydration. Second, that water has no chemical properties, which is wrong. And the third, that the human body can regulate its water intake efficiently throughout the lifespan of the person. And the fourth wrong assumption is that any fluid can replace water. Based on these 4 flawed assumptions, we have the sick care system that costs this nation trillions of dollars every year. Now, this is a problem. We need to correct this understanding or misunderstand it. Dry mouth is not a sign of dehydration, because in order to be able to chew and swallow food, which is a primary function in the body, we produce ample saliva even though the rest of the body may be dehydrated.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't drink water on a regular basis, 6% of the water loss is from the interior of the cells, deep dehydration. And 26% is from water volume around the cells, and only 8% is from the blood or vascular system. But the vascular system not being a tight and rigid system, they tighten up and pick up the slack. And so whatever blood test we do will not reveal what's going on in the interior of the cells in a drought-stricken region of the body that is going to manifest pain or other conditions, because the human body manifests dehydration in 4 different ways. One is by its perceptive feelings. Being tired is one of them, because water is the main source of energy to the human body. Being anxious, being dejected, being depressed, these are all signs of dehydration, because neurotransmission depends on water.
Now, they tell us that, for example, depression is caused by a chemical imbalance in the body. Are you saying...
Yeah, but you see, that is exactly correct, because dehydration produces that chemical imbalance.
Uh-huh.
Because when you are dehydrated and you are not getting rid of the toxic waste out of the body uses some of the essential amino acids, such as tryptophan and tyrosine, as antioxidants. It sanitizes the chemical byproducts of metabolism that would otherwise be very toxic. Mm-hmm. So we lose the essential ingredients that in the brain would produce serotonin, melatonin, tryptamine, and indolamine. And on the sympathetic nervous side will produce adrenaline, noradrenaline, and dopamine, which are all essential to fight depression.
Okay, now, before we get too far afield, you were going to list the 4 things that the body reacts to.
And then the body produces its crisis calls for water, and these are the major pains. Heartburn is one of them, rheumatoid joint pain, back pain, migraine, headaches, colitis pain, fibromyalgic pain. Even anginal pain is a sign of dehydration where you feel the pain. Very simply put, it's when there isn't enough water to circulate to the area and wash the toxic waste away from the areas that are being worked, but water is not reaching them.
Okay.
The chemical toxic waste builds up, and the nerve endings register this environmental change with the brain, and brain registers it or translates it in form of pain, with our conscious mind, saying that don't use this area, don't create any more toxic waste. That's why pain is a limiting factor. And we should translate this pain as dehydration, but we in medicine have confused this issue and have given medications which silence the cries of the body for water with medication, but we don't correct the dehydration. That's why pain medications are needed throughout the lifespan of the person who's suffering pain.
Okay.
And then the body has its drought management programs. When there isn't enough water, whatever water that is available has to be rationed. There is a rationing program. And these rationing programs of the body, unfortunately, have been labeled as allergies, asthma, hypertension, diabetes, and autoimmune diseases. These are the major problems where drought in the body manifests itself in these forms. And we in medicine never understood this. We give chemicals and toxic material to a dehydrated body. For example, in hypertension, we give diuretics to a person who's retaining water in order to filter and inject water into vital cells. We get rid of this extra water that the body is storing for reverse osmosis program to deliver water in an emergency manner. And that's why we harm people who are hypertensive with the medications that we give. Mm-hmm. And these people eventually need the secondary drugs, beta blockers and calcium blockers, and eventually the bypass surgery and whatever else. And also, recently, this cholesterol fraud is picking up its pace, and people are being told to take cholesterol-lowering medication. Cholesterol, there is no such thing as bad cholesterol. The very bad cholesterol is actually a life-saving element, because we measure the level of cholesterol in the body, in the blood that we take out of the veins. And nowhere in the history of medicine is there a record of cholesterol having ever blocked the veins of the body. If the stickiness of cholesterol is the criterion of its being called bad and the reason why arteries are blocked, then the veins should block much easier, because in the veins there is no mixing, because there is no pulse.
Right.
The blood floats upward, and cholesterol would separate and stick to the walls. If it was the stickiness of the cholesterol, that was a problem. But there is no such thing. The reason why we have cholesterol in the arterial system, when blood becomes concentrated and acidic, and through its path in the lung, before it reaches the left side of the heart, it loses more water through breathing, because every time you breathe out, you evaporate a whole lot of water with each breath. So the blood becomes even more concentrated, more toxic, more acidic. And this blood is circulated in the arterial system, and the first membranes that it attacks is the lining of the arteries themselves. And eventually the abrasiveness of the concentrated acidic blood rushing, being forced through the arterial system, which are now tighter because of dehydration. It produces abrasions and tears. And unless something covers up these abrasions and tears, the pressure would find the lip, and the blood would tear membranes out and throw it as embolus downstream. Mm-hmm. The role of cholesterol in the body is to come and cover this area that is now damaged or is cut, and cover it up, make it smooth so that blood could roll over it, doesn't have a lip to tear the membrane off.
Can I ask you a question? I'm curious about all of the things that we eat, and how you were saying before that water is different than beverages, coffee, tea, soft drinks, beer, what have you, that people drink, thinking that it's the same thing. If we all drank all the water that you recommend we do, but we continued the kind of diets that most people, particularly Americans, most people eat, which are not very healthy diets, would we get healthier, or would we still be damaged by the food that has too much salt, too much fat, too much sugar, et cetera, et cetera?
Barbara, what happens is that when you are dehydrated, the body begins to store salt in order to beef up the volume of water outside the cells, because there are two oceans of water in the body. One ocean is inside the cells of the body, and then there is the ocean outside. The water that we drink goes and joins the ocean inside. The salt that we take maintains the volume of the ocean outside of the cells. These two oceans have to be in balance. In dehydration, the ocean outside the cells expands, and from this extra water around the cells, water is filtered and injected into vital cells. The body in a dehydrated state constantly seeks salt, and that is why we have a whole lot of problems, or we associate salt with the health problems of the body, whereas salt is actually saving the life of a person. Because if we didn't have the salt, we wouldn't have the volume of water to inject into the brain cells, to the liver cells, and so on. And a lot of people who overeat are actually looking for salt in their diet. So excess eating is a problem of dehydration.
They tell us to eliminate salt, don't they?
Well, they tell you to take medication. They tell you to take cholesterol-lowering drugs.
Right.
They tell you to take diuretics and get rid of the water out of your body when your body is actually dehydrated.
If you could give me a thumbnail of how much water should I drink every day, and is there anything I should do in addition to the water, what would it be?
Actually, what you need is basically very simple. You need 2 quarts of water as a minimum, because you need about 1.5 quarts of water in order to manufacture urine and get rid of all the toxic waste.
Mm-hmm.
You need 1 quart of water to breathe out. In other words, it evaporates and keeps the lungs moist.
Mm-hmm.
You need about just under 1 quart of water for perspiration. All right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is roughly, we have about 4 quarts of water.
That's a lot of water. How can you drink that much water?
We make up 2 quarts of that from the food that we eat.
Oh, okay.
From metabolism, every time oxygen and oxygen metabolism produces water.
Okay.
We make up about 2 quarts of water from our food and from our activity. And so basically we are short of minimum 2 quarts of water a day. We need to drink that throughout the day. And the best way to deal with this is to look at the color of the urine. A fully hydrated person produces a colorless urine. A somewhat dehydrated person produces a yellowish urine. And a truly dehydrated person will produce orange urine.
Mm-hmm.
Orange urine is an indication of catastrophe down the road, because we're talking about the 4th dimension of time, dehydration of today throughout 1 week, 10 weeks, 100 weeks. If a person is constantly dehydrated, a whole lot of problems will occur.
Can I ask you a question? What is your opinion of a person who is suffering from a cancer, let's say prostate cancer?
Well, very simple.
No, let me just answer the question. And they're on an IV drip to give them fluids, and the doctor takes them off of the IV drip because they say they don't need it. What is your opinion of that?
I think the doctor is ignorant. We in medicine are truly ignorant of the human body and its physiology. We've been indoctrinated by the education that has been produced by the pharmaceutical industry, and we've taken everything as gospel, which is wrong. And I had an occasion to talk to a man in the pharmaceutical industry. I said, he said, how do you use our medication for peptic ulcer disease? I said, no, I don't. He said, what, you use our competitors? I said, no, I don't either. Then he said, for God's sake, what do you use? I said, water. He said, what, water alone? I said, yes. And then I asked him, I said, you know that histamine is the main water regulator of the body. Why do you insist that its action should be blocked? And furthermore, if you're asking a doctor to do that, why don't you tell them this? And his answer was that we are not here to educate the doctors. We are a manufacturing company interested in selling our product.
Dr. B, we're at the top of the hour. Can you stay with us over the top?
Sure.
I'd love that. Thank you very much, and we will continue. I have so many more questions. My guest is Dr. B as well as Bob Butts. We're talking about the curative, the preventive effects of plain water. The more I hear, the more fascinated I am, and I hope you are too. I'm Barbara Simpson. This is Coast to Coast AM. Stay with us.